Hello class, if you're watching this video, I apologize. I had to leave. One of my daughters was sick, so please bear with me, get through the video, and tomorrow I will go back over parallelograms with you, but I think they're a pretty easy topic right here. We have been studying polygons, which is any enclosed shape, and now we're going to specifically study one type of polygon, and what we're going to spend the next probably week and a half doing is quadrilaterals. And the first thing I need you to know about a quadrilateral that you probably already know is how many sides does it have. So it's 4 sides. And then the second most important thing that we need is what's the total interior sum in any quadrilateral? Well, if you remember, interior sum's n minus 2 times 180. So if I take n, which is 4, and I subtract, and 2 times 180 is 360 degrees. So on the flow chart sheet, please go up to the top of your flow chart where it says quadrilaterals, and please fill in have 4 sides, and the interior sum is 360. So that is something I expect you to know, but besides that, that's very easy. So right now we're going to focus on parallelograms. And a parallelogram, if you know how to read a flowchart, is obviously still a quadrilateral. So you already know 2 properties about this parallelogram. You already know that it has 4 sides, and you know that it has an interior sum. Tomorrow we're going to do a sketch pad so that you can remember these a little bit more, but right now I'm just going to have to tell you the properties. In a parallelogram, first of all, it has the name parallel for a reason. In a parallelogram, opposite sides are parallel to each other. So if this was my parallelogram, I would put arrow here and arrow here, which means that those are parallel. It also means that these are parallel to each other. So one thing that you're going to remember, if these are parallel, these are going to be same side interior. And if I extended these, this and out here would be alternate interior angles. So one is that opposite sides are parallel. And hopefully that's easy because it is a parallelogram. The second thing that's true in a parallelogram is that the opposite sides are also congruent. So this and this have to be the same length, and this side have to be the same length. So again, I'm going to put opposite sides are congruent. And the next property about a parallelogram is that the opposite angles, this angle and this angle, are congruent, and this angle and this angle would be congruent. And if you remember, that comes from parallel lines. These have to be supplementary, so do these, and so it ends up opposite angles are congruent. So instead of opposite sides, it's opposite angles. And then the fourth property we already talked about twice already. I've said it, but I said that on these 2, which are consecutive because they're without interruption, or these, because they're consecutive, which means without interruption, have to be 180 degrees. So I'm going to say that consecutive angles are supplementary. And there's one more property, but before we do that, please go to your flow chart, and I want you to fill in under parallelogram number 1, which says both pairs of opposite sides are parallel. Number 2, both pairs of opposite sides are congruent. number 3, which is both pairs of opposite angles are congruent. And then go down to number 5, which says consecutive angles, whether it's here, whether it's these two, or it's those two, or these two, any two consecutive angles are always supplementary. And then the last one we're going to talk about, if you flip to the next page of your notes, it's easier to draw on this. Remember, this is what we call a diagonal. Diagonals connect to non-consecutive vertices, so from here to here. And in a parallelogram, the diagonals are bisected. So that's our property, number 5. And it doesn't matter the order, but you have to know these. Okay, so if they're bisected, it means that this and this would be the same. It does not mean that this entire diagonal and this entire diagonal are the same. But if they bisect each other, then this piece and this piece and this piece and that piece are congruent. So that is what it means to be bisected. If we go and look at some of our examples, you'll see that mathematically it's pretty simple. So your first example on your note sheet, I say find the value of each variable in this parallelogram. So without any signs or symbols or markings, you don't know this is a parallelogram except for my directions, I tell you. So if it's a parallelogram, it means opposite sides are parallel. It also means opposite sides are congruent. So if that's 11, x is 11, and 8 is y. In this one, I tell you again in the directions, it's a parallelogram. And then, obviously, you figure it out. So if you could just pause the video and do the math, you should set up that b plus 2 equals 7. Okay, so A is 17 and B is 5. If you go to your third example, you'll see that we're now talking about angles. Again, it's a parallelogram. So in this picture, opposite angles are congruent. Please remember, consecutive are supplementary, so next to each other are supplementary, but opposite each other are congruent. So if they are congruent, I set them equal, and n is 13, I think. Sorry, 19. Example 4, I definitely want you to try to pause the video. Again, it's a parallelogram. You would also know it's a parallelogram because of these parallel symbols. But besides that, I have sides and I have angles, so please take a second and try to figure these out. So I'm going to start with the sides first. It doesn't matter if you did sides or angles, but since these are opposite each other, they have to be equal. So it's 40 equals 2x, and x has to be 20. And the angles might have taken you a second. I have 3 angles, which means I'm going to have consecutive, which means next to each other. So these two are going to be supplementary, as are these z and y. But since y is opposite 123, y is just 123 degrees, and z would be 180 minus 123, which is 57. Okay. In example 5, I give you one that relates to the diagonal. And so if you recall, diagonals bisect, which means cut in half. So if I cut this and this in half, then h minus 8 has to equal 12. So h is 20. And then g plus 7 has to equal 15. And I think that's 22. Oops, sorry, subtract 8. So G is 8. Okay. And then the last one's just a little combination of anything we know. This, if you see this picture, since I'm telling you that this whole angle's 84, which means this whole thing over here. So just pay attention to that symbol when you get it. So that means that whole angle's 84. So go ahead, pause the video, please. I'd like you to really try this one. Try to figure out what you know about angles and see if you can break it up. First thing I would do is, if that's 84, I know this whole angle is 84. And then, because the angles like this would also be supplementary, it's 180 minus 84, which is 96. And this whole angle is 96. So if this whole angle is 96, and this little piece is 28, 96 minus 28 is 68. So I, K, H, which is right here, is 68 degrees. So that is our properties of parallelograms. So please make sure on your flow chart sheet that you have parallelograms and quadrilaterals filled out. That parallelograms, both pairs of opposite sides are parallel, both pairs of opposite sides are congruent, both pairs of opposite angles are congruent, the diagonals bisect, which means cut in half, each other, and the consecutive angles are supplementary. Please also have that a quadrilateral has 4 sides and its interior sum is 360. Please realize when we're talking about a flow chart that if I ask you the properties of a parallelogram, it actually has 7 total properties. It has the 5 of a parallelogram, but it also takes on the 2 properties of a quadrilateral. So keep that in mind when you're looking at your flow chart. All right, thanks. You're going to try a worksheet, and then there's also Math Excel for this section. Talk to you later.